Greetings! My name is Sterling and today we're diving into Warhammer Age of Sigmar. A setting that I love a great huggy bunch. Love the minis, love the stories, love almost everything about it. However, let's not beat around the bush, it's also a very deep setting. With a lore so convoluted and tangled, it would make even Vatividia blush. Previously, I did my best to give a bite-sized introduction to the setting, go watch it if you haven't already, but today we're getting into the factions. The armies you can actually bring to the tabletop and annoy your friends with. Now, this won't be an exhaustive deep dive, unless you'd fancy sitting here until our fragile mortal shells crumble to dust, but think of it as a quick primer. A foot in the door for James' workshop to break into your house and steal your savings. Longtime viewers will know this video is actually a compilation of a series I've been working on for way too long, where I cover the factions by each of the 4 Grand Alliances. And now I've stitched them all together for your viewing pleasure. So if the audio quality fluctuates a bit here and there, and it sounds like I recorded some parts at different times, and sometimes even in different rooms, that's why. The dark arts of sound engineering continue to elude me. Anywho, having said all that, I hope you get your viciously overcharged popcorn and favorite beverage ready, for it's time to gush about a thing I'm passionate about and really like a great big deal and want to give a big hug and a smooch. Kicking us off with...
Hey, you're an idiot, but you're my best friend.
Now, before we get into the factions, and I'll try to keep this brief, what actually is the Grand Alliance Order? Well, to put it in the words of Morathi herself, they are the champions of progress, who in spite of their differences in form and methods, are united in their desire to live, to feast, to love, and to grow old in the service of their gods. They are what some might consider the good guy faction, though as you'll probably figure out soon enough, that's not entirely accurate. This is Warhammer, everyone is at least some shade of bad guy. For many, their reason for working together stems more from how the alternatives are significantly worse, rather than how they all love to sit around the campfire and talk about their favorite anime together. Infighting is far from the norm, but it's not entirely uncommon either for a wide variety of petty reasons. Regardless, they're still the most likely of the 4 factions to actually build things up and cultivate them, rather than just burning it all down for the laughs. But let's not waste any more time and get right into the actual meat. Kicking us off with... So let's start off strong with the poster boys and girls. Now, I've already kinda gone over them before, but to reiterate, during the Age of Chaos, as Archaon and the gang were dumpstering everything, Sigmar would occasionally take a look at the realms and see if he could spot anyone who was still holding out. Once he did, he'd put a little pin on those who were the most heroic and would eventually yoink their souls back to Azyr once they inevitably died. Then he'd take these noble souls and reforge them anew into his chosen warriors, immortal soldiers that had the power of the storm flowing through their veins, and who would play a big role in Sigmar's eventual counterattack, as these Stormcast would serve as literal shock troops and rapidly conquer several important realm gates, cities and other points of interest. Now, being a Stormcast isn't just about brawn. Sure, if you could beat the snot out of a Chaos Warrior with his own arm, you had a decent shot of attracting Sigmar's attention, but he also recruited from the wise, the magically gifted, and even the odd generous farmer who shared his harvest with those in need. Because, let's face it, there's more to heroism than just flexing muscles. That is not to say that they couldn't still absolutely crush you like a tin can if they wanted to, but the Stormcast are taken from the best and brightest the mortal realms has to offer. They are not just unfeeling angry punching machines, but actual people with actual lives. At least they start out this way. Because there's always a catch to immortality, and this is no different. Each time a Stormcast bites the dust, they get a free ticket back to Azyr for a makeover. A pretty nifty party trick, and it essentially lets them respawn an infinite amount of times. Unfortunately, every time they do so, they lose a little part of themselves and come back changed. Sometimes it's something cool, like talking with a voice of booming thunder. But more often than not, they lose pieces of their memory and personality. They might forget the face of their children, the taste of their favorite food, or even what their favorite food is, over and over until they eventually just turn into unfeeling androids, devoted only to the cold, methodical tides of war. This obviously causes them no small bit of existential dread, but they keep trucking on because they know that if they falter, most of the mortal realms will probably follow in their wake. They are, after all, heroes true and true, and not one of them would ever turn their back upon those in need. As for sub-factions, they are divided into storm hosts, autonomous legions with their own cultures and vibes, with some examples being the Hammers of Sigmar, for if you like vanilla ice cream and plain cheese pizza, the Hallowed Knights, for if you like praying that good word, and the Astral Templars, for if you are really into the Monster Hunter series. Coolest model? Yndrasta, the Celestial Spear, because who doesn't love giant women in giant armor?
I own a musket for home defense, since that's what the founding fathers intended.
So you have your hulking superhumans in golden armor. But what about the regular folk of the mortal realms? What about the average Joes and Schmoes who can't count on magical resurrection or lightning magic, but just on their trusty spear and a bucket of gunpowder? Well, the cities of Sigmar have got you covered. Way back when the Stormcast were in the process of reclaiming bits and pieces of the realms, Sigmar opened the gates of Azyr and sent through countless expeditions with the purpose of rebuilding all this newly gained territory. A few turns of Civ later, and these ramshackle fortresses had turned into massive multicultural metropoles, where elves, dwarves and humans are all working together in the name of not being eaten by something bigger than them. Now, living in the mortal realms obviously isn't particularly easy, but this is no Attack on Titan situation where scared peasants are hiding behind their walls from the big bad. Plenty of these cities are actual, cities, not just glorified fortresses, with shops, taverns, libraries, and residential districts. Hell, most folks living there will probably go their entire lives without seeing a demon or orc. But if trouble does rear their head, these cities are still more than capable of defending themselves without their big brothers around. Regiments of soldiers will take up arms in a heartbeat, using the divine trinity of fate, steel, and a lot of gunpowder to make whatever's threatening them regret waking up that day. Their biggest cities include Hammerhall, a city that's so large it spans 2 different realms, Greywater Fastness for the Factorio players, and Settler's Gain for if you really like elves and really don't like pesky things like free will. Favorite model? Big Cannon! Because nothing says mess about and find out like a big hunk of metal that goes boom.
Why are you naked? Air, hot.
Now, once upon a time, the dwarven god Grimnir and his brother Grungni had gotten into a bit of a pickle and found themselves chained together at the top of a mountain. No, we don't know how, just roll with it. Until Sigmar just kinda happened to pass by and free them. The two were obviously pretty grateful for the help and offered an oath in exchange for Siggy's timely assistance. Grungni swore to one day help Sigmar in his time of need, while Grimnir offered to beat the snot out of whatever Sigmar wanted. So Sigmar, being put a bit on the spot, just kinda pointed to this giant lava lizard called Vulcatrix and was like, you can attack that thing, I guess. And Grimnir being Grimnir, he did. And then he died. But not before he and Vulcatrix both exploded into a million pieces. And wherever their blood fell, there formed pieces of Urgold, an incredibly valuable mineral infused with divine essence that looks almost identical to regular gold. Now, most people would get a bit down after their god got splattered. But in classic pragmatic dwarven fashion, his followers, the Fyreslayers, got right to work gathering the Urgold in the hopes of one day reforging their god anew. But that's not all they did with it. They also discovered that Urgold can be used to forge powerful runes, which can then be implanted like it's Cyberpunk 2077 and make the Fyreslayers go sicko mode in the heat of battle. However, just like Cyberpunk 2077, overuse tends to make dwarves go a bit loopy, so their rune priests at least try to moderate it. Emphasis on try. They have also received a bit of a mercenary reputation over the years, one which is not unfounded but also not just based on greed, despite what some might tell you. As previously mentioned, Urgold is on first sight virtually identical to regular gold, meaning that there are a lot of people who unknowingly possess it. In some cases, the Fyreslayers are more than happy to just, take it and beat up anyone who makes a fuss. But braining some random person on the street to steal their gold necklace tends to not be socially acceptable, so many have had to adapt to more legitimate strategies. And seeing as how there's no shortage of conflict in the mortal realms, this tends to be through mercenary work, with great warbands of Fyreslayers setting out to unfamiliar lands, ready to throw the lot in with whoever is willing to pay them the most, even if those who do almost certainly don't know what they're actually paying them with. They are also besties with the children of Vulcatrix and see them as beloved pets. So that's kinda cute. For sub-factions, you have the lodges, basically clans that span multiple settlements and cities, with some examples including the Lofnir, who really like their magma troughs, the Greyfeard, who are especially into the whole mercenary shtick, and the Hermdar, for if you want to stick it to the bourgeois. Favorite model? The naked flaming dwarf man. You know the one.
It's Monopoly. Invest inside some property. Start a corporation, make a logo, do it properly.
So yeah, you got your immortal warriors fighting to reclaim lost lands. You have your regular Jains making a stand against darkness. You have your flaming dwarfs fighting whoever and whatever to one day reforge their god. But you know what's actually important? The thing that actually matters? Money. And lots of it. And the Kharadron Overlords know this. The KO, as I will be referring to them from now on, were once regular boots on the ground dwarves that lived in Kamon, the realm of metal. Dwarves being dwarves, this suited them very well, at least until the thing that happens, and they suddenly had a lot of demons on their doorstep, very eager to get a piece of dwarf souffle. Some tried to make a stand, but the more reasonable among them realized that they had to skedaddle as soon as possible. Problem being is that there wasn't really anywhere to escape to. Chaos was quite literally everywhere, so wherever they fled, Mr. Big Nuts over here would soon follow. But as it turns out, the dwarves were technically one step ahead on this, as they had recently begun construction of these flying sky facilities that were used to refine and research this newly discovered floating mineral called ether gold. So most of the dwarves did the reasonable thing, and over time these facilities would become bustling centers of trade and civilization, the skyports. These days, the KO run a meritocratic, pragmatist steampunk society high up in the skies of the mortal realms. Governed by the Code, a ginormous set of rules and amendments that talks about everything from import taxes to the exact viscosity of beard oil, they set out on massive sky fleets all across the realms in search of commerce and riches. Though, rest assured, they are not above coming up with their own unique interpretations of this code when the opportunity to make dosh presents itself, which happens a lot. They also have a pretty interesting take on gods and magic. While they can't straight up deny their existence, you'd have to be pretty thick to do so in a setting with actual literal demons from hell, they've got a rather pragmatic view of the whole thing. Like, sure, you can shoot fire out of your hands, but it probably has scientific reasoning behind it, rather than because I drank a bottle of Fyreslayer piss and sang prayers to a volcano. Superstition tends to get in the way of profit margins, and few things are as horrifying to a KO than a bad quarterly report. As for their major skyports, you have Barak Nag, the science team, Barak Urbas, for if you want to be a rich bastard, and Barak Mornag, for if you want to yar har fiddle-dee-dee. Coolest model? All of it. Aztec lizard people riding dinosaurs that shoot lasers. Do you think Aztec lizard people riding dinosaurs that shoot lasers sounds cool? And then the Seraphon are for you. So, TLDR, once upon a time you had this race of frog god things called the Old Ones, who thought that chaos was being a bit too troublesome for their liking, so they created these biological androids made of stars to deal with them. These were the Seraphon, separated into the teensy cutesy skinks, the larger and bitier Saurus, the largerer and smashier Kroxigor, and insanely overpowered magic toads, the Slaan. Then they scribbled some basic instructions on a napkin which they called the Great Plan and pissed off to the store to get orange juice, never to return. So now the Seraphon are just kinda chilling out in one of the mortal realms' 17 jungles, occasionally blasting demons with space lasers and trying to figure out what the fuck the Old Ones were actually trying to do. Their handwriting is apparently quite atrocious. They also aren't exactly wellsprings of empathy, owing to the fact that they're cold-blooded lizard people androids. So while they have a nominal alliance with the forces of order, this is more due to their absolute hatred of chaos rather than anything else. They're more than willing to bite your head off if you smell even 0.2% to chaos-y for their liking. Except the skinks. They're actually kinda cute. I like skinks. And also dinosaurs. Lots and lots of dinosaurs. For their factions, they are divided into constellations, with some prominent ones being the Fangs of Sotek, for if you want to actually give this friendship and peaceful coexistence thing a shot, the Coatl's Claw, for if you absolutely do not want to do that, and Dracothion's Tail, for if those OP magic toads weren't quite as juiced up for your tastes. Favorite model? A close tie between the humble skink Starseer and the Saurus Scar Veteran, because of the reasons stated above. Okay, so imagine yourself this for a moment. You're just some regular guy or girl or neither, whatever you're more comfortable with, living in some small sleepy fishing village in the mortal realms. One morning you're just sitting on the pier with your best mate Alfred, catching the occasional tuna while bantering and having a grand old time. Then suddenly like 15 horse-sized eels emerge from the water, accompanied by a mob of eyeless pale people and a massive turtle who stab you and steal your soul. This is about your average Idoneth meet and greet, but let's take a step back real quick. So way back when the old world got better to mush, Slaanesh ended up basically eating every elven soul in existence, which didn't particularly endear them to the surviving elven gods, who took advantage of Slaanesh's groggy state to lure them to the dimensional equivalent of a dark parking lot, kick the snot out of them, and have them spit all those souls back out. The elven god Teclis then used these to create new elves, with his first creation being the Idoneth, who were relatively stable, except for the fact that about 99% of them were born with incomplete souls, which left a big chunk of them as Namarti, blind husks who lived short and miserable lives. Teclis tried to immediately control Zeth's creations, but with a bit of help from Uncle Tyrion, they managed to escape to the ocean depths, where they set up shop as the new underwater head honchos. As it turns out, even a Reaper Leviathan can only do so much against the liberal use of power word disintegrate. Nowadays, the Idoneth are rarely seen, but far from inactive. They can usually get by just fine in their underwater enclaves, but do occasionally pop up to the surface to resupply on soul juice. This tends to be through a way of raiding coastal settlements, but they're not particularly cruel or kill crazy, so depending on what enclave you're dealing with, they might leave children and a good chunk of the population intact. This has obviously made their alliance with the forces of order a bit awkward, but they're just as likely to smack around chaos or greenskins, so they largely let it slide. They also have this interesting thing known as the Ether Sea, which is this weird magical phenomenon that allows them to bring a little bit of home with them wherever they go. Unfortunately, for literally every other faction, their home is about 1,000 meters below sea level, so this manifests in the ability to allow their aquatic mounts to move through thin air, cause their enemies to drown on dry land, or get crushed by hydrostatic pressure. Home sweet home, right? Their biggest enclaves include Nautalar, a city-state built on the back of a giant sea creature, which just goes incredibly hard. Ionrach, for if you want to at least try to be sort of nice, sometimes. And Domhain, for if you got that dog in ya. Favorite model, Lotan the Squidman. And if you disagree, well, let's just say those are some pretty bold words for someone in squid shanking range.
It's all about me! I'm fabulous!
So, after the mixed results of the Idoneth, Teclis and his brother Tyrion gave elf creation another go and actually did things a bit better this time with the Lumineth, who were pure, stable, and about everything that they dreamed an elf to be. That is to say, ridiculously arrogant. And when I say arrogant, I mean that they were so lost in their own sauce that they made several magic doomsday weapons just to prove that they could, not even bothering to hide them away safely, but instead just using them as fancy art deco or glowy paperweights. To no one's surprise, they almost blew themselves to smithereens during the Age of Chaos, but they actually learned from their almost apocalypse, and, with the aid of Teclis and the moon spirit Selenar, they now seek to better themselves through strict codes of self-discipline and spirituality, with some being so in tune with the world around them that they can actually call upon the spirits of the realms itself, summoning forth the living manifestation of mountains or the winds to aid them in battle. Though while they went through a lot of soul-searching, their egos are still as present and pointy as their hats. Albeit now less in a "haha, nothing bad could ever happen to one as beautiful as I" way, and more in a "oh, you adorable dumb little human, let the grown-ups handle this while you play with your toys, hehe" kind of way. With the frustrating part being that they're usually right, even if their methods tend to make Scorched Earth look awfully passé. Another fun factoid is that they're all completely addicted to a hip new designer drug known as Ether Quartz, a concentrated piece of Hayish's magic that boosts their reflex and senses up to 11 at the cost of slowly dulling their emotions and humanity. But unlike the Stormcast, who get all deep and existential about becoming unfeeling automatons the more they reforge, the Lumineth actually think this is pretty cool and based. And before you ask, yes, Lumineth players love it if you make crack addict jokes at them. Their biggest nations include Siar, for if you want to make the US weapon industry look like a joke, Zytrek, for if you want to be the most wizardy wizard that ever wizarded, and Iliafa, for if matriarchal cloning shenanigans sounds like a chill Saturday afternoon. Favorite model? The Skinari Katalar. I let Lucia pick this one. So in today's episode of the Grand Alliance Order Aren't the Good Guys, we have the Daughters of Khaine, where the Idoneth are at least kind of forced to go on the occasional stabbing, and factions like the Lumineth or even the Seraphon are so focused on dealing with threats like chaos that they have a tendency towards collateral damage. The Daughters of Khaine are a matriarchal faction of girl boss murderers who worship the elven god of murder and do about what you'd expect in the name of said worship. They are led by Morathi, the high priestess of Khaine, who a lot of people are really thirsty for, and who sends the faithful of Khaine all across the mortal realms in order to expand their influence or just to stab people for the giggles. Sometimes both. Except, psych, none of that is true. Okay, well, they do stab people, but they're actually being played for a fool by Morathi. Khaine is actually long dead. Everything the cult does is puppeteered by her, and she secretly siphons all the juicy worship for herself. Now, you might think that tricking a cult that worships murder isn't the brightest idea, but she recently managed to ascend to godhood as Morathi Khaine, so she clearly knows what she's doing. They also have monster girls. Kind of. So basically what ended up happening is that when the elven gods were taking turns giving Slaanesh a fair kicking, Morathi also wanted a few souls for herself. Now, nobody really liked her, and she wasn't even a god at the time, but she did help them out with this particular issue, so they agreed. Though, as a final middle finger, they basically only gave her the souls that had been left to marinate in chaos juice the longest, or who were on the verge of falling apart. As a result, the elves she created with said souls are a bit more changed than most, but it's nothing a bit of blood magic can't fix, and at least they're incredibly loyal to her, so she kind of made it work. As for their sub-factions, they're divided into sects, basically religious movements that focus on specific aspects of their faith, with some of the major ones being the Tzeentch, for if you're really into the aforementioned monster girls, Kailebron, for if you want to be real sneaky beaky like, and the Crave, for if the murder cult of killers who dye their hair with blood wasn't quite enthusiastic enough for your liking. Favorite model? The Melusai Blood Sisters, because I'm just a massive sucker for cool spooky masks.
The trees can't be harmed if the Lorexes are.
Hey you. Yeah, you. Do you like trees? Do you sometimes go to the park and just get really angry when people walk all over the grass? Are you a radical ecological terrorist? Well then, the Sylvaneth are for you. The Sylvaneth are the ancient fae protectors of the realms, spirits of nature that dwell in the deepest, darkest forests and who follow Alariel, the elven goddess of life, whose spirit song connects them no matter where they go. Once upon a time, they were actually pretty chill, only occasionally messing with mortals when they cut down one too many trees or venture too deep into the enchanted woods. But after the age of oopsie whoopsie and a few visits from grandfather, they came out of the whole experience a lot more bitter and a lot more down for extreme violence. Alariel's spirit song having long taken on a more warlike rhythm over its original gentle tune. These days, it's not unheard of for entire towns or groups of travelers to just go missing one day, with nothing remaining but bones and bits of flesh that are being used as nutrients for the forest's many inhabitants. As seems to be a running theme in this video, this has made diplomacy a tad difficult at times. But they usually only go against those who've messed with nature in one way or the other, and even have a special hatred for chaos, so Sigmar mostly turns the other way. The keyword being usually. Just don't cut down any trees in the mortal realms, or go into any forests. Ever. It's stuff like this why the KO prefer to stay so high up in the sky. For their sub-factions, they are divided into glades, a sort of nature-y family who all share specific traits or traditions, with some of their biggest ones being the Gnarlwood, for if you're a lore-obsessed nerd, the Ironbark, for if you want to be besties with the dwarves and thus incredibly based, and the Dreadwood. Just take a guess. Favorite model? The War Song Revenant, because
Bitch!
So let's put some very swift groundwork down first. What even is Chaos? Well, to make a complicated story a bit shorter, Chaos is essentially a dark tumor upon reality, a corrupting influence that represents all that is vile, and it only exists to spread its malign influence, twisting everything into an image of their own making. This is embodied by the Chaos Gods, who each embody different aspects of bad, and while they can work together at times, or even rally under a single champion like Big Bad Archaon, their end goal is ultimately to be the only god left standing, and they are very quick to turn upon their siblings if one is at risk of gaining even the slightest edge over everybody else. But in order to unleash the proper amounts of mayhem upon their siblings and or everybody else, they need bodies. And where better to get them than the mortal realms' many inhabitants, in which they have found a very willing audience. Because unlike the distant gods of order, these are generous beings. They actually appreciate you and reward you for your service. Not with a promised reforging or other scraps of half-assed favor, but with actual blessings, gifts, and perhaps even immortality if you play your cards right. However, for all their sweet talk, Chaos is inherently corruptive and destructive. You might find glory and power, but you might also be deemed too weak by the gods and forsaken, or even earn their ire and have your soul be tormented by demons for eternity. But hey, you don't get anywhere without taking a chance, right? So why not spin that wheel and see where you end up? But that's enough yapping. Let's start off properly with...
Hate you, you hate me, let's team up and kill Barney.
So let's start off simple, at the ground floor of this chaotic pyramid, if you will. Where the cities of Sigmar are the regular schmoes of order, the slaves to darkness are in many ways their chaotic equivalent. These are your everyday tribesmen, cultists, and those who were ghosted by Sigmar during the Age of Chaos, who now serve far more benevolent masters. And while a lot of them worship a specific chaos god, a fair chunk of them align themselves with Chaos Undivided. Instead of picking one slice of the chaotic pie, they worship the entire bakery, worshipping chaos as a fundamental force of existence rather than just a few squabbling gods. This has the benefit of not being shackled to the whims of a single demonic megalomaniac for all eternity, but does come with the caveat that since doling out blessings now requires an actual level of cooperation from the four banditos, they will be a bit less potent and take between 5 to 10 business days to be handed out. And maybe because of this, they tend to also be a bit more sane than your typical god-specific murder shocks. Of course, sane is a relative term when you're dealing with actual demons and eldritch gods, but many of them definitely lean to the more cautious side of things. For many, the chaos gods aren't their friends, but more of a means to an end. Now, obviously, with how corruptive chaos is, this approach can backfire in a multitude of ways, but it does make them a bit more interesting and human, rather than just "Rawr, me go kill babies." Take the big man himself, for example. Despite being the head honcho of all things chaotic, he pretty much just really hates the gods and constantly gives them the finger. Archaon plays along at times, but that's only because he hates Sigmar more. The other gods know they're on his hit list, but since he's probably the most competent guy they got, there's not much they can do about it. So they keep giving Archie free stuff, which he in turn uses to pit them against each other and keep them squabbling while he goes off and does his own thing. What an absolute lad. For the sub-factions, you have a wide variety of warbands, hordes, and other nasties, with some prominent examples being the Dark Oath, for if you want to negotiate mates rates with an extra-dimensional deity, the Host of the Everchosen, for if you want to polish up Archaon's breastplate at least twice a day, and the Idolaters, for if you want to be a Jehovah's Witness, albeit considerably less evil. Favorite model? Archaon the Everchosen. As if all my fawning over him didn't give the game away.
Now, I'm really mad.
So let's dive into our first Chaos God. Khorne, the god of murder, bloodshed, rage, and just about everything you'd find on a mid-tier metal album cover. Khorne is a simple god, but that's not a weakness. Blood for the blood god, skulls for the skull throne is his motto, and it speaks exactly to his straightforward appeal. Under his influence, life becomes a non-stop blur of bloodshed and violence. No complex thoughts, no insecurities, feelings of depression or inadequacy. There is only war, there is only murder, there is only blissful slaughter. Hell, Khorne doesn't even care who it is you're currently beating to death with their own spine. Khorne Khorne does not care from whence the blood flows, so long as it does. If you're fighting, he's happy. Murder your enemies, murder your allies. Fuck it, who even cares? Just make sure you're doing it right. Khorne is quite a stickler for rules, so waving your little magic wand around and imploding someone's liver is a big no-no. Grab a sword like everyone else, you pansy. But despite his wanton violence, Khorne's followers aren't just mindless brutes. They're forged on the battlefield, and you don't make it very far on those without some tactical smarts. Sure, there might be plenty of warbands who just run at you and hit you with pieces of sharp metal until you're a red based, but there are equally as many who set up ambushes, use proper formations, or destroy a stronghold from within. And that last one might seem strange to you, given who we're talking about, but as with all worshippers of the chaotic goons, Khornes are many and varied. They have a tendency to worm their way into every facet of society, and while someone looking like the Rock's homicidal cousin won't sneak their way into a city, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Also, as a quick aside, as most of the main gods' subfactions are really just variations of "will murder you and burn your stuff," or "will burn your stuff and murder you," I thought it'd be a bit more interesting to focus on their cults and all the forms they might take. Anyway, as the god of war and blood, Khorne values aggression and combat prowess, but the ways to showcase this are diverse, and not always so obvious. Cults of Khorne might stay under the radar by running a gladiatorial arena, operating as a group of mercenaries with a particularly brutal reputation, or even posing as a weathered monster hunter who only goes after the toughest prey. Violence is not a rarity in the mortal realms, after all, and using it for good is a quick way to earn trust. Favorite model? The Slaughter Priest. Because I know I've said it before, but that's a metal album cover if I've ever seen one.
Let me in, I'm trying to...
And for number 2, let's go in a slightly more sensual direction. Slaanesh, the chaos god of excess and emotion, of pain and pleasure. Enough is a completely alien concept to their followers, for they always hunger for more. More feelings, more stimulation, more of anything. And while, yes, sexy times are a part of this, Slaanesh isn't just the god of the old bedroom rodeo. Excess and pleasure can also manifest in the pleasure of creating art, of learning and improving your skills, or even just enjoying a nice meal. This makes Slaanesh perhaps the most insidious of the chaos gods, because with Slaanesh, more than any other, to fall into their grips is to simply be human. We all indulge in excess in our lives, and it's with these little pleasures that Slaanesh tempts you, but soon the pleasure fades. The tastes become familiar, so you get creative. You keep pushing those boundaries, you turn that knob further and further until you're completely lost to they who thirst and spend the rest of your days snorting demon dust off the backs of elven prostitutes. Oh, you poor thing. As for recent events, Slaanesh is still locked in a dark basement by the elven gods, which means that the Horde Rat, the absolute bastard, has taken over their spot in the Pantheon. Being stuck in Luxembourg doesn't mean that they're powerless, however, as the chains are beginning to slip and their followers are still very active, with some trying to find their god and others trying to replace them. And on the subject of cults and cultists, Slaaneshes thrive in environments rich with excess and emotion. They might pose as bizarre art galleries with paintings so vibrant they hurt to look at, demanding martial arts schools that push perfection to its limits, or even as a charming nightlife personality who always knows where the best parties are. Favorite model? Cheekvault, Prince of Slaanesh.
Uh-oh, stinky.
Put away your fancy robes and inordinate amounts of drugs and huddle up with a smallpox blanket of your very own, because it's time to talk about Grandpa. Nurgle is the god of plague, rot and decay, but also of life. That might seem a bit odd, but the thing is that Dera's grandpapa values all life, not just the pretty marketable kinds, which includes things like bacteria or insects. He embodies a sort of grim mirror to the cycle of life. For at school it might be depicted as the old deer eats grass, wolf eats deer, wolf dies and returns to the earth. In Nurgle's domain, it's more like you get infected with 15 horrible diseases, your body rots away where you stand, and from your corpse hatch thousands of demonic flies who go and infest others. But despite this wonderful mental image, Nurgle's followers are actually surprisingly cheerful. You see, Nurgle isn't just the god of anti-vaxxing aunts, but also embodies finality, of knowing where you're gonna end up. Death not in the literal sense, we'll get to that, but in a more philosophical way. In Nurgle's care, there is no uncertainty or fear, and he's even nice enough to dull the ability to feel pain or discomfort. Granted, this pain was probably caused by him, and is the result of your guts turning to sludge, but it's the thought that counts, and it's what makes the covert crew equally cheery and nigh impossible to kill. And as an aside, this is also why they refer to him as Grandfather Nurgle. Most gods wouldn't go out of their way to lessen someone's suffering, so there is a genuine, if completely twisted, sense of love between Nurgle and his followers. As for cults, Nurgle is at his best in places where life and death are front and center. They might disguise themselves as a mysterious hospital in an area where disease runs rampant, a farmer whose grain tastes a bit odd, or even a religious order offering comfort to the suffering. Favorite model? Once again going to cop out and just say all of it. Hey, listen, I reserve the right to pull this card at least once every Grand Alliance, alright?
My machinations lay undetected for years, for I'm a master of
Tzeentch, the changer of ways, the lord of sorcery, the ponderer of orbs. Tzeentch is the god of magic, change, and intrigue. And while change may seem like an abstract thing to be a god of, it maybe makes a bit more sense when you imagine that Tzeentch also embodies things like ambition and hope, both being a desire for things to be different and for the status quo to be uprooted, hopefully in your favor. Tzeentch thrives on constant change, but this is also why he and Nurgle don't get along, because where Nurgle is all about acceptance and stagnation, about the destination, Tzeentch is all about the journey, forever searching but never actually finding. For example, Tzeentch might empower your plot to kill a political rival, but instead of being able to sit on your golden throne, polishing your crown and having cocaine parties that would blow Slaanesh's androgynous tits off, you might then in turn get off yourself, which causes your entire faction to fall apart, and before you know it, your country's embroiled in a civil war for the next century. Things keep a-changing, you get the idea. This is where Tzeentch thrives. Layers and layers of schemes and intrigue so convoluted that even he doesn't know where it all leads. But this isn't just for ideological reasons, like you could argue for some of the other gods, but just because Tzeentch thinks it's funny. More so than any other god, Tzeentch is in it purely for the love of the game. He doesn't really care who wins as long as it's entertaining. This comes with the consequence that he is just as likely to throw his own followers under the bus as he is to aid them, but hey, at least you get some cool magic powers out of the deal and it keeps you on your toes, right? As for his cults, arcane fuckery and backroom deals are the name of Tzeentch's game. So his followers might pose as intellectual gatherings, eccentric mages that eat your gouda, or even as that one mysterious fortune teller whose predictions steer people's lives in weird and ominous trajectories. Favorite model? The Kyric Acolytes. Because there's nothing more Tzeentchy than going up against the wizard army, expecting to fight geriatric grey geezers, only to get thrown into the ring with a bunch of gym bros doing wrestling moves and getting leg dropped to death.
Rats, we're rats, we're the rats.
So you got your demons and dark gods, but now get ready to chuck it all in the bin, because the rats are here to play, oh yay. The Skaven are probably the most unique thing GW has ever created. They're also probably the most terrible thing GW has ever created. But like, terrible in a positive sense, not in the yeah. The Skaven are a race of bipedal rat people whose entire society and psychology revolves around the idea that they're the center of the universe. And I don't mean that as in the Skaven race as a whole. The racial supremacy would be far too charitable a trait. No, I mean as in this specific individual Skaven. Every member of their race thinks that they're the hottest of hot shits, that everyone else around them sucks and are willing to do whatever it takes to win the top position. Betrayal is inevitable, and paranoia is the name of the game. Did you drop your boss's favorite plate while cleaning? No, you didn't. It was actually Skittic over there. Did you mess up a crucial military mission? Nuh-uh. It's your subordinates who are too incompetent to follow your flawless orders. The only reason why they're even able to function as a society is because in the Skaven's long and extensive tier list of things they hate, everyone who isn't a Skaven ranks just above themselves, meaning that they direct just enough malice towards the rest of the universe that their entire civilization doesn't implode. And there's plenty of malice to go around. This is Warpstone. It's pure crystallized chaos magic that the Skaven value above all else. It can be consumed for a quick, if uncontrolled burst of magical energy, or can be used as a powerful ritual reagent. And the Skaven use it to make nukes, and guns, and flamethrowers, and chlorine gas. All just because they hate you. They're all just such unrepentant little shits who care about nothing but themselves. But if they weren't the worst thing to ever grace the mortal realms, their god, the Great Horned Rat, definitely takes that award front and center. He's the minor, currently major after stealing Slaanesh's spot, chaos god of being an asshole. And that's literally just it. He's the embodiment of everything awful about the Skaven except pumped to 1,000,000. He gets just as much of a kick out of tormenting his own ratty followers as he does everyone else. And with how numerous these rat bastards are, there's always plenty of entertainment to go around. As for their sub-factions, they're divided into about 1,000,000 bickering clans, though they usually fall into a few distinct categories known as the Great Clans, with some prominent examples being Clans Verminous, for if you want to send enough of your soldiers into the meat grinder to make the Eastern Front blush, Clans Pestilence, for if you really like Nurgle, but think that those few redeeming qualities are just taking it way too far, and Clans Scryer, for if you want to shoot lasers and gobble enough Warpstone to OD a Vermin Lord. Favorite model? The Warlock Bombardier. Because Skaven science superior, yes, yes!
Var, X3, what's this? Oh,
So, first of all, what is the Grand Alliance Death? Well, to put it simply, it's essentially a catch-all term for everyone who has sworn loyalty, experiences may vary, to the great necromancer Nagash. If his name and beautiful visage didn't give him away, Nagi is a grade A necromancy undead enthusiast. He's literally the person who invented it, and he has the entirety of Shyish more or less to call his own. Unlike the wanton violence and destruction of chaos and well, destruction, Nagash is more of a grim mirror to the forces of order. Because, just like Sigmar, he's not just in the business of tearing stuff down, he's also trying to build something to last. A semblance of order in the madness of the mortal realms. Unfortunately, the way Nagi seeks to do this is by murdering every living thing in existence and raising them as unfeeling, unthinking, and completely obedient undead. His order is one of unchanging eternity, of death and dust. Ironically, for such a control freak, however, his forces don't always get things done as directly and orderly as you might expect, and free will might be a bit more important than Nagash gives it credit. But with that in mind, let's dive right into the undead masses, starting off with...
So suck your dick, blood.
So let's start off with the most classic of the death factions. The Soulblight Gravelords are exactly what you'd expect when you hear spooky undead murder Mardi Gras. Endless waves of skeletons and zombies shambling towards the living like a rotten tidal wave, with night terrors lurking in the shadows, ready to rip and tear through their prey. All commanded by an ancient vampire and their supporting cast of tier 3 necromancer subs. Now, vampires are about what you expect them to be. Pale nocturnal narcissists with an iron deficiency and a tendency for melodramatica. But they do have one interesting thing going for them. In a faction where just about everyone's intelligence rates just below that of a Twitch streamer, they have that most insidious of things: free will. Cause as much as Nagi would turn your bones into soup for saying this, you can't just point your zombie horde in a general direction of the living and hope for a World War Z style takeover. You need some strategy and a way to keep those ranks comparatively fresh. Similarly, you can't just murder bomb a kingdom, plant your flag and expect it to stay conquered forever. That territory needs to be managed and defended. And Mr. Godi or General Flaps ain't gonna be the ones to do so. So Bone Papa gave this authority to the vampires. Naturally, as the free-willed are bound to do, it took approximately 10 minutes before they started whining amongst themselves, splitting into different dynasties and bloodlines, each with their own centuries-old rivalries and grudges. Not great for the war effort, but wait, it gets even more shaky. Because they also did one of those other classical habits of free-willed individuals, actually thinking about things. And it didn't take long for the vamps to realize that if everyone were to die, they're going to have to start skipping a few meals. So while they still pay Nagash plenty of lip service, a fair few of them are quietly looking for ways to ease his grip a bit, and maybe claw themselves a bit of independence, with varying levels of success. As for sub-factions, these blood-sipping bastards are divided into the aforementioned dynasties, vampiric families that share specific traits or cultural bits and bobs, with some prominent examples including the Vrykos, for if you're hashtag Team Jacob, the Avengori, for if you're an appreciator of creatures of a monstrous nature, and the Castellai, for if you wish to study the blade and suffer no shameful displays. Favorite model? Nagash. Because if I didn't put him somewhere in this video, he'd probably send skeletons to my house to beat me to death with hockey sticks.
This edible ain't shit.
So let's say you prefer your flavor of Halloween to be a bit more bloody and cannibalistic. A bit more Until Dawn and a lot less Castlevania. Well, say hello to the Flesh Eater Courts. Their story starts with one of the first vampires, a hot and cool gentleman by the name of Ushoran. Obviously, being cool and generally kinda nice, he managed to piss Nagash off. Maybe because he still had his nose and Nagi got jealous. Either way, the big man cursed Ushoran with looking like your alcoholic mother and threw him in a big tower with funhouse mirrors. This naturally caused him to go completely bonkers, until the tower eventually got knocked over, Ushoran escaped, and he created his own smelly lineage of ghouls and vamps. But here's where things get a bit more interesting. These ghouls might be disgusting murder gremlins ripping people apart with their bare hands, but they don't see it that way. In their minds, they are heroes. Armor glistening in the sun as they strike their enemies down with courage and honor. Ushoran didn't just pass down his good looks to his childer, he gifted them a little shared piece of madness. Where we see horrible bat-winged monstrosities, deranged gibbering Nosferatus, and Redditors, they see divine angelic warriors, holy priests manifesting miracles left and right, and like a knight or something. And it's contagious. Spend too much time around them, their territories, or god forbid, actually eat or drink anything they offer you, and you'll get pulled right into their glorious vision. And once you're in, that's it. You're on a one-way trip aboard the crazy train to Bonkersville, and there's no getting out. And this delusion can get weird. As in, when a ghoul picks up a wooden tube and looks through it like a spyglass, it'll actually work like one. Or if they hit you with a piece of bone, believing it to actually be the legendary +5 attack sword of Lord Bumsmore, they'll cut you clean in two. It's like the universe asks them for a source, and they hit it with the old Armstrong special, and the universe just goes, alright, whatever. As for sub-factions, they are divided into a wide set of kingdoms and city-states. Read disgusting dilapidated ruins in a swamp somewhere. With the most celebrated being the Blister Skin, for if you want to praise the sun. The Grizzlegore, for if you just want to be at peace, man. And the Morgaunt, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Favorite model? Our renowned God Emperor himself. Forever praised be his name.
Please don't eat my ass spirit.
The Nighthaunt are next on our list, and they're probably among the easier factions to understand. Nighthaunt are ghosts, the tortured souls of the departed who have come back to this side of the sticks to haunt the living and bother random camera crews in abandoned housing. What is interesting, however, is why they are the way they are. And this is also where we get a little bit of characterization for old Mr. Gaigotsu, or at the very least the depths of his pettiness and crooked sense of humor. Cross him while you're alive, which isn't hard because he's kind of a grumpy bastard, and he'll curse you in the afterlife. Horrible criminals get transformed into chain rasps, bound and shackled for eternity, while cowardly schemers who never had the balls to own up to their actions are condemned to an eternity of bloodthirsty rampages, forced to be as obvious and unsubtle as possible, forever stuck doing what they dreaded the most. Nasty folks who maybe kinda had it coming, but on the other side you have the dread-side Harridans, who slice and dice anything in their path while being fully aware but unable to control their limbs. Their crime? Saving people from the brink of death. Something that the god of death didn't particularly appreciate. This twisted justice means that every Nighthaunt has their own unique and probably quite depressing backstory. So if you're into making up your own narratives and are a fan of dark depressing media, this is your ghostly gang. As for their subfactions, they are divided into processions, spectral legions that have a bad habit of just appearing somewhere and causing a lot of trouble wherever they do. With some notable examples, including the Emerald Host, for if you're a 10-month sub to Lady Olinder's OnlyFans, the Scarlet Doom, for if you're angry, and the Quicksilver Dead, for if you want to murder fools but look absolutely fabulous while doing it. Favorite model? Lady Olinda, because I am one of those 10 months OnlyFans subs.
I am currently being hunted by the IRS for 16 counts of tax evasion.
So you've got your narcissistic Nosferatus, your rampaging murder hobos, and your depressed ghosts. But do you know what's really important? What actually matters? Taxes. And the Ossiarch Bonereapers know this. And they will make sure you pay up. The Ossiarch Bonereapers, or OBR for short, are in many ways Nagash's response to the Stormcast Eternals, his own special legion of undead super soldiers, crafted body and soul specifically to serve him. Each one is meticulously crafted for a specific role, from no-brainers like soldiers, strategists and mages, to more unexpected things like architects and craftsmen. But no matter what tricks they're best at, they are all unflinchingly loyal to Nagash. However, soul shaping and constructing isn't a perfect science, and bits and pieces of individual personality can start seeping through. This means that while they look like a bunch of typical emotionless skellies, they're actually sentient beings with thoughts and emotions. Ironically, just like with the Vamps, Nagash's flagship faction against free will, rainbows and kittens has themselves a lot of autonomy, a fact that definitely keeps El Bon Padre up at night. But beyond being Nagash's murder legion of contradictions, they are also his personal debt collectors. Every settlement under Nagash's reign, or anyone who has the misfortune of being in the same postcode as the OBR, is eligible for the Bone Tithe. As the name implies, this means that you'll have to donate a set amount of specific bones at regular intervals. They don't care how you get these bones, and I'll leave it up to your individual imaginations, but they will notice if you try to cheat them or come up short. And if you refuse, well, they'll help themselves to whatever you owe them, and they are very thorough. Oh, and FYI, tax rates can and do vary. So, have fun. As for subfactions, the OBR divide themselves into legions, with the biggest being the Mortis Praetorians, for if you're a 10-month OnlyFans sub to Katakros, the Crematorians, for if you want to be equal parts friendship and existential crisis, and the Null Myriad, for if you want to make wizards cry. Ha! Bunch of nerds. Favorite model? Katakros, Lord of the Necropolis. And I mean, good lord, those are the kind of apps you can literally sharpen swords on. So what is the Grand Alliance destruction? Well, it's probably the simplest out of all of them to explain, honestly, though that's not a bad thing and kind of by design. Destruction believes in two core tenets: might makes right, and civilization is a bit cringe, innit? They're all about strength and the tearing down of structure. Structure, after all, exists only to coddle and protect the weak. Like, why do you even need walls around your house anyway? What, are you too weak to protect yourself, you big softy? Nay, better to shit in buckets and die of polio before you hit double digits. Just like Gorka Morka, the greatest and greenest of all the gods intended. Better to return the realms to its original primal state, where the weak fear the strong, the laws of the jungle reign dominant, and a real muscle-maxing alpha males can prevail. Though the exact definition of what strong even means, or what this primal state looks like, is something that they themselves don't even know. So let's get into each of these grand visionaries and look at what they believe the future should entail. And where better to start than the biggest, the meanest.
Here we go, here we go, here we go.
The Orruk Warclans, whose name I could joke about if anyone outside of my specific slice of Europe would get it, are, shockingly, orcs. Big, mean, and green, they come in two distinct flavors. Thick and luscious, and lean with zero sugar and no added fats. To start with the bigger meteor lads, we have the Ironjaws, big angry brutes who live by might makes right. If you're the biggest, you're the boss. If someone disagrees, bash their Zoganet in and prove them wrong. Kind of like the US election system. Now, one Ironjaw is already a proper headache. Quite literally and extremely when they get too close with their preferred piece of jagged metal. But their overall threat level is quintupled when they get a proper WAW going. Which is basically when a whole bunch of orcs decide they really don't like a particular settlement, kingdom, or species and decides to smash it up for the laughs. Fun shenanigans ensue. And on the other hand of this murderous coin, you have the no, bad Turadin, we have the Cruel Boys. Who are a bit scrawnier than your regular orc, but make up for it with trickery, actual tactics, and sheer, undiluted bastardry. They go for just about every shitty trick or MLL marketing scheme in the book to reach their goals, which can range from conjuring ancient swamp magic to beguile and misdirect their foes, to pissing in the local water supply and switching your heart medication for vitamin gummies. And don't let their slutty wastes distract you from the fact that they are still orcs, and can still punch your teeth through the back of your head blindfolded. As for the subfactions, we're going 2 for 2. For the Ironjaws, you got the Iron Sons, for if you want to employ the heights of big thinking, like using favorable weather or flanking, and the Sky Bashes, for if you want to yar har fiddle wah. And for the Cruel Boys, we have the Grinnin' Blades, for if you're a big fan of stealth survival horror, where you're the whore, and the Big Yellers, for if you're coked up on so much gamer subs, you can 360 no-scope snipe a rat's left testicle from half a mile away. Favorite model? Ghoul Dan and Little Dan.
He's a little guy. He's just a little guy. He's just a little guy.
So what if you like the backhanded sneakiness of the Cruel Boys, but wanted to drop even more mass and calories? And also haven't gone outside and let the sun touch your skin in the last 7 years. Well, we got goblins. The Gloomspite Gitz are the great green legions of the dark places of the world. Endless hordes of little green guys who might not have the physique or durability of their larger cousins, but every bit of cruelty and more to boot. They worship the Bad Moon, a sort of weird smiling fear and hunger looking ass thing that is unfortunately very much real and has a bad habit of just kind of appearing in random places. And immediately causing a hell of a lot of mayhem, madness and mushrooms. Lots and lots of mushrooms. A gift to all the champignon fans in the audience, you'll get a real kick out of their minis. Though a big part of this complete pandemonium that George the Big Friendly Moon causes is because of the gobos themselves, who religiously chase the thing around and are attracted to its horrible glow like a bunch of terrible green moths. And a bunch of inventive moths at that, being at the general bottom of the destruction food chain and, well, honestly just the Age of Sigmar food chain in general, they've had to get increasingly creative so they can get to shank people good, which ranges from mixing their mushrooms into horrible poisons to the tried and true methods of being friends with the big kids so you don't get bullied. Notable mentions being squigs, which are basically like red basketballs made of teeth, and anyone who's ever had a basketball spiked straight into their face during PE knows how dangerous a prospect that is. Drogs, which are literally just trolls, and giant spiders. Because imagine having a fantasy setting without giant bloody spiders. As for the subfactions, I'm going to be a little naughty and skip this step and just tell you to read Gloomspite right now. No amount of funnies I make in this section will explain the sheer horror of these little green ass baskets as that book does. Favorite model? Goapalooza, easily. Even if you have very little interest in the setting, which if you're watching this video, I kinda hope you do, just at least buy this set. You won't regret it.
Please, you have to crush me.
So once upon a ye olden time, there was a very big dude known as Behemat, who was Gorka Morka's best mate. The two got up to all sort of dastardly mischief until one day Morka Gorka thought it'd be funny to ask Behemat to give Siggy a little poke. Sigmar being Sigmar, that is to say, him, completely cold-clocked Behemat into a coma so hard he didn't wake up for 1,000 years. And then smaller, but still very huge versions of himself crawled out of his mouth, known as the Gargants, and immediately got up to all sorts of trouble. Now, the Gargants aren't really a unified force, even for the abysmal standards of destruction factions. They really all just spend their time meandering about and doing whatever the hells they feel like. I mean, just one of them can punt the greater demon like they're a weird immaterial football. Are you really gonna expect them to follow rules? Occasionally, a few of them might band together or team up with other forces offering them free food and drinks, but even then this is considered a pretty risky deal as you're more giving them suggestions than holding even the slightest shred of actual power over them. They're also all food fetishists. This is canon. It's in the lore. Literally everything in their culture is named after feet. It's kinda weird, and also smelly. Also, as the idea of a sub-faction for these guys is laughable at best, since that would require the barest semblance of administration, and pan-scrappingly terrifying for the rest of the universe at worst, I will instead regale you with some of their favorite pastimes. Man Skittles. A game for risky thrill seekers. Whenever you're on the battlefield and there's a big clump of little folks together, grab something big, like a rock, big animal, building, whatever, and try to knock out as many people with a single throw. Tank tipping. So the cities of Sigmar have these tanks, right? Wouldn't it be funny to see how far you can kick those? Wake belching. A favorite of mercenaries who are bored on nights where there's nothing to stomp. Burp as loud as you can in the middle of a settlement and try to wake up as many people in one go as you can. Favorite model? The big one. And last, but most certainly not least, we have the ogres. And unlike the other more rowdy destruction factions, these are true cultured individuals. They are Epicureans, gourmets with refined palates that will taste only the finest of caviar. Unfortunately, these refined palates usually consist of people, and just about anything else they can get their hands on. I might have been stretching the definition of refined a tad. An ogre is like 3 times as large and beefy as a human, and keeping a body like that going at full efficiency takes a lot of nutrients. So ogres have this little quirk where their stomachs can digest just about everything, even magic or inorganic materials like metal. You might see a fully armored knight, they see canned meat, except the can is also edible. And because of this, food is central in their culture. They will set out in large hosts all across the mortal realms in order to devour whatever meals they can get their hands on and tear down anything that tries to tell them no. Occasionally, they might be open to trade or do mercenary work for their meals, but as with every destruction factions, this is a risky proposal at the best of times and only works for as long as they respect you, which isn't very often, in which cases they go right back to stamping on your prized flower bed and eating your dog and or toddler and or you. But they're not all just a bunch of hungering brutes wandering about looking for things to murder. Some of them ride on animals as well. The Beast Claw Raiders are ogres who have gotten a little dollop of divine punishment and are now eternally chased by a massive fuck-off blizzard. We don't know exactly why this happened. Some say it's because they ate some of Gorka Morga's leftovers he was saving for himself. Others said they just pissed off Sigmar, which, yeah, fair enough. But the end result is that they always need to be on the move in these massive caravans stretching through the realms. And if you thought a regular ogre was a headache to deal with, imagine one riding on a mammoth, whose horns are made of stone and murder. Have fun. For sub-factions, we have the titular Mawtribes, large factions of large lads with an equally large appetite, with some prominent examples including the Blood Gullet, for if your preferred tastes include black pudding, blood panekakker and tegwekwe, the Underguts,
Bitches love cannons.
and the Winterbite, for if your preferred tastes include these unholy abominations whose existence is a sin. Favorite model? The humble ogre glutton. Like me food, like me mates, ate being hungry, simple as. And that's it. The end. Every single army in Age of Sigmar summarized and quickly explained. It took a lot longer than I would have liked, owing to things like school, work, and my dwarven brain just being sad sometimes, but I got there in the end anyway. And I'd like to thank everyone who followed me along the way. I hope I helped inform some of y'all what armies to pick, or if nothing else, just taught you a bit more about this wonderful setting and all the weird stuff that goes on there. If I did, let me know below. I'd love to hear it. And if you like this journey, remember to like, subscribe, send a personal letter to GW asking for me to become their official mascot, symbol, CEO, and ice cream taster, and I'll see you all later. Bye-bye!